Little girl sees blind millionaire trapped in electric fence. Then she does this. Comment below, telling me what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and let me know which city you are watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story, and I want to get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sun was just peeking over the mountains of Willow Creek when Lily woke up shivering from the cold inside the cardboard box that had become her shelter 3 weeks ago. The 4-year-old girl rubbed her dark little eyes, trying to wipe away the tears that always came in the morning when the reality of her situation hit with full force. Her barefoot little feet touched the icy pavement behind Henderson's bakery, where kind-hearted Mr. Henderson, 67, secretly left day-old bread for her to eat. Lily looked around the still empty street, her matted dark hair falling over her thin, dirty face. The little outfit she wore, a pink dress now faded and torn, had been the same for days. Her tummy rumbled with hunger, but she knew she had to wait for Mr. Henderson to arrive and open the bakery. In the meantime, she decided to walk through the streets in search of something to eat, or perhaps someone who might take pity on her. The painful memories of how she ended up in this situation flooded her mind as she walked along the cobblestone streets of the historic center. 2 years ago, her father Joshua had left for work one morning like any other and simply never came back. Valerie, her 35-year-old stepmother, had waited a few weeks before showing her true colors towards Lily. The cruel words echoed in her memory. "You little pest. It's because of you that your father left me. I can't stand looking at your face anymore." Being kicked out of the house had happened on a rainy Tuesday night. Valerie had screamed that she couldn't stand supporting someone else's daughter anymore and pushed Lily out, locking the door and ignoring the girl's desperate sobs. Since then, Lily lived on the streets, sleeping where she could, eating what she could find, always afraid of adults who shooed her away or cursed at her. On that specific morning, Lily decided to venture into the town's upscale neighborhood, where the houses were bigger and perhaps someone might have mercy on her. Her thin little legs carried her down tree-lined streets she had never seen before, with imposing mansions protected by high walls and iron gates. The contrast with her reality was stark, but she held on to the hope of finding something to eat. It was when she approached a particularly grand property that her ears caught a disturbing sound. Desperate screams from a man echoed from inside the property, words cut short by panic that made Lily's heart race. "Help! Someone help me! I can't get loose!" The hoarse, anguished voice cut through the morning air like a wail. Lily approached the wrought-iron gate, her curious eyes trying to see through the decorative bars. What she saw left her paralyzed with both fright and compassion. A tall, elegant man wearing expensive but rumpled clothes was stuck to the electric fence of his own property. His movements were uncoordinated and desperate, muscles contracted by the electricity coursing through his body. The man was Edward Blackwood, 58, known throughout Willow Creek as the owner of the region's largest handcrafted furniture factory. His grey hair was disheveled, and his eyes, even in the darkness that had dominated him for 3 years due to blindness, reflected deep terror. His white cane had fallen a few meters away, out of reach, leaving him completely helpless. "Please, if anyone is there, help me," Edward screamed, his voice choked with pain and despair. "The fence key is in the blue box near the gate. Turn it off." Lily felt a knot in her stomach. All the adults in her life had been sources of pain and rejection. Valerie had kicked her out, strangers on the street shooed her away, even some older kids mocked her situation. Why should she help another adult who would probably treat her badly as soon as he was free from danger? But something in that man's voice touched a sensitive chord in the girl's heart. Perhaps it was the genuine despair. Perhaps it was the natural compassion children possess before the world hardens them. Lily looked around and saw the blue box the man had mentioned. Her small fingers managed to open it, revealing a red switch. "Sir, I'm going to try to help you, Lily shouted, her high-pitched little voice cutting through the morning air. But I'm scared. Please, child, I won't hurt you. Edward replied, his voice loaded with a mixture of relief and desperation. Just flip the switch. Lily looked for a dry branch on the ground, and with extreme care used it to flip the switch. The electric hum ceased immediately, and Edward collapsed to the ground, free but exhausted and trembling. Lily remained outside the gate, ready to run if necessary. Edward stayed on the ground for a few minutes, catching his breath and processing what had happened. When he finally managed to stand up and grope for his cane, he called out, "Little girl, are you still there? What is your name?" "Lily," she replied timidly, still keeping a safe distance. "Lily, you saved my life," Edward said, his voice choked with emotion. "How can I thank you?" The question took Lily by surprise. No one had ever asked her what she wanted or how she felt. I was just passing by and heard you screaming," she murmured. Edward approached the gate, trying to locate the girl by the sound of her voice. "You sound very young. Where are your parents?" Tears returned to Lily's eyes. "My daddy disappeared and my stepmother kicked me out of the house. I live on the street now." The silence that followed was heavy. Edward, even in his physical and emotional darkness, managed to perceive the pain in the voice of that child who had just saved him. "How old are you, Lily?" "4, she replied, sobbing quietly. Edward felt like he had been punched in the stomach. A 4-year-old child, alone on the streets, had been his salvation when he needed it most. The contrast between his privileged situation and that girl's vulnerability hit him with devastating force. "Lily, are you hungry?" he asked gently. "Always," as she replied with the brutal honesty of childhood. In that moment, Edward made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Would you like to come in and have some breakfast?" Lily hesitated. "Do you promise you won't hurt me?" "I promise," Edward said, and for the first time in 3 years, there was true sincerity in his voice. "You saved my life. It's my turn to try to save yours." Martha, 52, almost dropped the coffee tray when she saw Edward walking through the kitchen door, accompanied by a dirty and ragged child. The housekeeper, who had worked for the Blackwood family for 15 years, had never seen her employer show interest in anyone since the accident that left him blind. "Mr. Edward, what happened? Why do you look like that?" Martha asked, observing her boss's rumpled clothes and disheveled hair. Her eyes then fixed on Lily, who was hiding behind Edward's legs, trembling with fear and cold. "Martha, this is Lily. She saved my life this morning," Edward explained, his voice still choked with emotion. "I got stuck in the electric fence and she helped me. I want you to prepare breakfast for her." The housekeeper frowned, her protective instinct towards her employer speaking louder than compassion. "Sir, are you sure? This girl could be street children sometimes." She hesitated, looking for diplomatic words. "Martha," Edward interrupted with a firmness he hadn't shown in years, "she is 4 years old and is alone in the world. Prepare breakfast, now." Lily watched the exchange of words with wide eyes. The mansion was bigger than anywhere she had ever been, with elegant furniture and a nice smell of cleanliness that contrasted drastically with the reality of the streets. Her bare little feet sank into the soft kitchen rug, a completely new sensation for her. Martha sighed and began to prepare a meal, but her movements were stiff and her glances at Lily loaded with suspicion. "Mr. Edward, may I ask how you ended up stuck in the electric fence? You know this property better than anyone." Edward sat heavily in a chair, the weight of the morning's events finally hitting him. "I had a terrible nightmare early this morning. I dreamed about the accident again, but this time I could see. When I woke up, I was so confused. I went out to walk in the garden without my cane. I ended up getting lost in my own house and—" He stopped, unable to continue. The truth was that the nightmares had become more frequent in recent weeks, always involving memories of the accident at the factory that had left him blind. Guilt and loneliness consumed him night after night, driving him to increasingly erratic behaviors. Lily, sensing the sadness in Edward's voice, approached timidly. "Sir, are you crying?" she asked, her childlike voice full of genuine concern. Edward touched his own face and realized tears were running down his cheeks. "It's nothing, little one. I'm just tired." "When I cry, it helps if someone pets me," Lily said, reaching out her small hand to gently touch Edward's arm. The simple gesture provoked an overwhelming emotion in the man, who hadn't received any demonstration of human affection in years. Martha watched the scene with growing surprise. She had worked for Edward through his most prosperous phase, witnessed his marriage to Diana, seen the gradual isolation that preceded the accident, and accompanied his descent into bitterness and loneliness after losing his sight. She had never seen anyone manage to break through the emotional barriers he had built around himself. "There, it's served," Martha announced, placing a plate with fresh bread, scrambled eggs, fruit, and a glass of warm milk in front of Lily. The girl looked at the food with wide eyes, as if it were a treasure. "Can I eat all this?" she asked, incredulous. "Of course you can," Edward replied, smiling for the first time in months. "Eat as much as you like." Lily began to eat with a voracity that broke the hearts of both adults present. It was evident the girl hadn't had a proper meal in a long time. Between bites, she told small details of her life on the streets, always with the brutal naturalness of children. "I sleep in a box behind Mr. Henderson's bakery. He is very nice. Sometimes he leaves old bread for me. But I'm scared of the big boys who sometimes show up at night," she related, as if describing the weather. Martha felt her heart tighten. Despite her initial suspicion, it was impossible not to be moved by that child's situation. "And how long have you been living on the street, dear?" "Since Aunt Valerie kicked me out. She said I was a pest and that because of me, my daddy left," Lily replied, her voice getting lower. Edward leaned forward. "Lily, did your father really leave, or did something happen to him?" "He went out to work one day and never came back. Aunt Valerie said he abandoned me because I was too much trouble, but I behaved well, I swear." Tears returned to Lily's little eyes. The girl's story awakened something deep in Edward. He himself had been emotionally abandoned after the accident, first by friends who drifted away, then by partners who questioned his ability to lead the company, and finally by Diana, who couldn't handle the new reality. "Martha, I need you to prepare the guest room. Lily is going to stay with us for a few days," Edward announced suddenly. "Mr. Edward," Martha protested, "are you sure? We know nothing about this child, about her family. There could be legal complications." "She is 4 years old and is living on the street," Edward retorted firmly. "What complications could be worse than that?" Lily stopped eating and looked at the two adults. "Are you going to let me stay? For real?" Her voice trembled with emotion and hope. "For now, yes," Edward replied, ignoring Martha's worried looks. "But we need to sort some things out first." During the rest of the morning, Martha reluctantly prepared the guest room, while Edward tried to process the magnitude of what he had decided. He hadn't planned to take in a child, especially considering his own fragile emotional state, but something in Lily's presence had awakened a protective instinct he thought he had lost forever. Lily explored the house with typical childhood wonder, carefully touching expensive furniture and observing colors she hadn't seen in weeks. When she reached Edward's library, she was fascinated by the rows of books. "Mr. Edward, do you read all these books?" she asked. "I used to read," he replied sadly. "Now I can't anymore." "Because of your eyes?" Lily asked with childish frankness. "Yes, because of my eyes. But you can listen to stories. I can tell stories to you," she offered excitedly. Edward smiled again, realizing how Lily's perspective was refreshingly different from everything he had experienced since the accident. To her, his blindness was just another obstacle that could be worked around with creativity and affection. In the afternoon, when Lily finally fell asleep in the guest room, wearing one of Martha's large shirts as pajamas, Edward found himself alone with the housekeeper in the living room. "Mr. Edward, I need to speak with you," Martha said, her tone serious and worried. "What happened today changed something in you, I can tell, but taking in a child is a huge responsibility. Are you sure you are ready for this?" Edward remained silent for a long moment, reflecting on the question. "Martha, for 3 years I've been drowning in self-pity and bitterness. Today, a 4-year-old child saved my life, literally and perhaps figuratively too. I don't know if I'm ready, but I know I can't simply ignore what happened. And if her family shows up, what if there are legal problems? Have you thought about that?" "I have, and I'll deal with it when necessary," Edward replied with determination. "For now, all I know is that an innocent child needs help, and for the first time in years, I feel I can offer something other than money." That night, Edward dined for the first time in months without needing alcohol to relax. Lily's presence in the house had brought a different energy, a sense of purpose he had forgotten existed. But as he went up to his room, he couldn't help but question the implications of his impulsive decision. Who was that girl really? What had happened to her father? And mostly, would he be capable of offering the stability she needed when his own life was an emotional chaos? Lily woke up in the middle of the first night at the mansion screaming desperately. Her screams echoed through the silent corridors, causing both Edward and Martha to run to the guest room. When they arrived, they found the girl curled up in a corner of the bed, shaking violently and calling for her father. "Daddy! Daddy, where are you? Don't leave me alone with her!" Lily sobbed. Still caught between dream and reality, Edward approached slowly, his hands groping in the dark until he found the edge of the bed. "Lily, you are safe. It's me, Edward. You had a nightmare." The girl threw herself into his arms, clinging to his shirt as if he were her only salvation. "I dreamed that Aunt Valerie had come to get me, and you had let her take me away." "That will never happen," Edward promised, surprising himself with the conviction in his own voice. "No one is going to take you from here against your will." Martha watched the scene with growing emotion. She had cared for Edward during some of his worst moments after the accident, but she had never seen him show so much affection for another person. The way he held Lily, as if protecting something precious, revealed a side of him she thought had been lost forever. "Do you want me to make some chamomile tea?" Martha offered, her initial hostility towards the girl beginning to unravel. "That would be good," Edward replied, still hugging Lily. "And maybe some cookies. I don't think any of us will get back to sleep anytime soon." While Martha prepared the tea, Edward stayed with Lily in the living room, where she began to tell more painful details of her life with Valerie. The stepmother hadn't just kicked her out of the house, but before that, had spent months blaming the girl for all the family problems. "She said I ate too much, that I wasted too much water in the bath, that my daddy had left because I cried too much at night," Lily related, her little voice breaking with every word. "She would lock me in the dark room when I asked when Daddy was coming back." Each revelation hit Edward like a stab. He himself had gone through emotional abandonment, but he couldn't imagine what a 4-year-old child would feel, being rejected by the only adults who were supposed to protect her. "Lily, do you remember what it was like before your father left? Were you happy?" Edward asked gently. The girl's little eyes shone. "Very happy. Daddy took me fishing at the river on Sundays, gave me piggyback rides, and always said I was his little princess. He worked a lot, but when he got home, he always had time to play with me." "And your real mother, do you remember her? Lily was quiet for a moment. She went to heaven when I was very tiny. Daddy said she was watching over us from up there. Valerie arrived later, and at first she was nice. But when Daddy disappeared, she changed completely. Martha returned with the tea and cookies, sitting with them in the living room. Lily, dear, don't you have any other relatives, grandparents, aunts or uncles? I don't know, the girl replied, nibbling on a cookie. Daddy never talked about family. I think it was just the two of us, really. Over the next few weeks, a routine began to establish itself at the mansion. Lily would wake up early and run to Edward's room, where he helped her get dressed and brushed her hair while she told him her dreams from the night before. Martha, gradually won over by the girl's sweetness, began preparing special meals and even bought some children's clothes. But it was during the third week that the first major complication arose. Edward was in his office trying to work when he heard Lily screaming in the garden. He grabbed his cane and ran as fast as he could, finding the girl hiding behind a tree, trembling with fear. "What happened?" he asked, panting. "There's a woman at the gate," Lily whispered. "She's shouting that she wants to see me. She looks like Aunt Valerie." Edward's heart froze. He had feared this moment would come, but hoped to have more time to prepare. "Martha," he called, "come here, please." The housekeeper appeared quickly, and Edward asked her to take Lily inside the house and lock all the doors. Then, gathering all his courage, he headed to the gate to face what he knew would be a difficult confrontation. Valerie was standing outside the gate, visibly agitated. When she saw Edward approaching, she began to scream, You disgusting rich man! Where is my stepdaughter? I know she's in there." "The girl is safe and well cared for," Edward replied with forced calm. "What do you want?" "I want my daughter back." "You have no right to keep her. I'm going to call the police," threatened Valerie. But there was something in her voice that didn't sound like genuine maternal concern. "Lily told me you kicked her out of the house," Edward retorted. "Why do you want her back now?" Valerie hesitated for a moment before replying. "I was going through a tough time, but I'm better now. I have a right to my daughter." "She is not your daughter," Edward said firmly. "You said yourself you are just a stepmother." "Her father disappeared. That gives me legal rights over her," yelled Valerie, but Edward realized she was more interested in causing trouble than actually recovering Lily. "If you have legal rights, then find a lawyer," Edward replied. "Until then, Lily stays where she is safe and fed." Valerie walked away, shouting threats, but Edward noticed she had looked at the mansion with an expression that mixed envy and greed. It wasn't love for Lily that motivated her, but the realization that the girl was now associated with wealth. When Edward went back inside, he found Lily hiding under the kitchen table, crying silently. Martha was trying to console her, but the girl was clearly terrified. "Is she going to take me back?" Lily asked with a trembling voice. "I won't let that happen," Edward promised, kneeling beside the table. "But I need your help to understand some things. Does Valerie have any legal role as your guardian?" "I don't know what that means," Lily replied. Martha explained gently. "He wants to know if when your daddy disappeared, someone officially said Valerie should take care of you." Lily thought for a moment. "I remember she took papers for some men in suits to sign. Then she said that now she was the boss of me." Edward realized the situation was more complicated than he imagined. If Valerie really had some kind of legal guardianship over Lily, taking her from the girl could be considered kidnapping, regardless of good intentions. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Edward called Harrison Miller, a lawyer who had handled corporate matters for his company in the past. He explained the situation and asked for an urgent meeting. "Edward, this is a very delicate situation," Harrison said when they met the next day. "If this woman has legal guardianship of the child, you could be in serious trouble." "But she abandoned Lily. The girl was living on the street," Edward protested. "Can that be proven? Do you have witnesses? Documentation?" the lawyer asked. Edward realized he had acted on emotional impulse without considering the legal ramifications. The owner of the bakery where she slept can testify. "Mr. Henderson, let's talk to him. But Edward, I need to warn you, even with witnesses, if Valerie has legal guardianship and decides to cause trouble, this could become a long and complicated battle." Meanwhile, at the mansion, Lily spent her days increasingly anxious. She had found for the first time in her life a place where she felt truly safe and loved. And the possibility of losing that terrified her. Martha noticed how the girl had stopped eating properly since Valerie appeared, and how she woke up several times during the night, checking if Edward was still in the house. "Mr. Edward," Martha said one morning, "you need to do something. This child is deteriorating from fear." Edward knew she was right. Lily had regressed emotionally, returning to showing some of the traumatized behaviors she presented when she arrived. But he also knew that any wrong step could result in the definitive loss of the girl. It was then that he made the bravest decision of his adult life. He would fight officially for Lily's custody, regardless of the legal or social consequences that might bring. Harrison's investigation revealed information that left Edward completely shaken. Sitting in his office on a rainy afternoon, the lawyer shared discoveries that changed the entire perspective on Lily's situation. "Edward, I found records on Joshua, the girl's father," Harrison began, his voice loaded with hesitation. He didn't simply disappear as everyone believed. Edward leaned forward, gripping his cane tightly. "What did you find?" "Joshua is committed to St. Francis Psychiatric Hospital in Oakville for 2 years now. He suffered a severe work accident and developed severe amnesia. Apparently, not even he knows who he is." The silence that followed was deafening. Edward felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. And Valerie knew this. Not only did she know, she was the one who committed him. "And there's more," Harrison hesitated before continuing. "Joshua worked for your company, Edward. He was one of the employees fired in the restructuring 3 years ago." Edward went pale. The mass layoffs he had authorized to maintain company profits came back to his mind like a vivid nightmare. Hundreds of families had been affected, but he had convinced himself it was a necessary business decision. "Are you saying I fired Lily's father, and because of that he had to look for work elsewhere where he got hurt?" Edward's voice was loaded with growing horror. Joshua was working on an irregular construction site when the accident happened, without proper safety equipment, without medical supervision on site. "He fell from a height of 5 meters and hit his head," Harrison explained. "The trauma resulted in brain injury that affected his memory." Edward stood up abruptly, walking to the window he couldn't see out of. The guilt he had carried for 3 years for his business decisions now multiplied exponentially. Not only had he destroyed lives with the layoffs, but inadvertently he had contributed to the suffering of the very child he now loved as a daughter. "Is there any chance of him recovering?" Edward asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Dr. Sebastian Vance, the doctor responsible for the case, said there are some signs of recent improvement, but the amnesia remains severe. Joshua doesn't remember his daughter, his deceased wife, anything from his previous life." At that moment, Lily ran into the office, as she used to do every afternoon when she returned from her walks in the garden with Martha. "Edward, Martha said you are working, but I brought flowers for you to smell." The girl held an improvised bouquet of daisies she had picked in the garden. Her arrival interrupted the devastating revelations, but also intensified the pain Edward felt. How could he look at that innocent child, knowing he had contributed to destroying her family? "They are beautiful, little one," Edward said, taking the flowers with trembling hands. "You can leave them on the table." Lily immediately noticed something was wrong. "Are you sad again? Did the man in the suit make you sad?" Harrison looked at the girl with compassion, understanding the emotional complexity of the situation. Lily, I am a friend of Edward's. I am trying to help solve some important things. About Aunt Valerie, Lily asked, her little eyes filling with immediate fear. Also about that, Harrison replied gently, but mostly about your daddy. Lily's eyes went wide. Do you know where my daddy is? Edward knelt beside the girl, fighting to control his emotions. Lily, we discovered that your father didn't leave because he wanted to. He got sick and is in a place where doctors are taking care of him. Is he in the hospital? She asked, her voice mixing hope and concern. In a special hospital for people who got confused and can't remember things, Edward explained carefully. Lily processed this information with the seriousness only traumatized children can demonstrate. Doesn't he remember me? The question broke both men's hearts. Edward hugged the girl, feeling the crushing weight of the entire situation. Not for now, little one, but the doctors are trying to help him remember. Can I visit him? Lily asked. Harrison and Edward looked at each other. Dr. Sebastian had mentioned that family visits could potentially help in Joshua's recovery, but could also be traumatic for both if there was no recognition. Let's talk to the doctors first, Edward replied, to see if it would be good for your daddy to receive visits. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Edward locked himself in his office and drank more than he should. The discovery about Joshua had unearthed all the guilt he tried to bury about his past business decisions. Martha found him 3 hours later, drunk and crying. Mr. Edward, what happened? For the love of God, exclaimed Martha, trying to help him up from the chair. I destroyed her family. Martha, Edward babbled. I fired the father, indirectly caused the accident, and now I'm here pretending to be the savior when actually I'm responsible for this whole tragedy. Martha had worked long enough for Edward to understand his self-destructive tendencies, but she had never seen him in this state. So what are you talking about? Between drunken sobs, Edward told everything. The layoffs, Joshua's accident, the discovery that Lily's father had been hospitalized for 2 years. Martha listened in silence, processing the devastating implications. And now what do I do? Edward asked. How can I continue taking care of her knowing I'm responsible for all this? You stop drinking and act like a responsible man, Martha replied with unusual firmness. That girl upstairs needs you. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. What matters is what you are going to do now. But what if she finds out? What if when she grows up she knows that I... Edward couldn't finish the sentence. If she finds out, you explain that you took a business decision that had terrible consequences and that you are trying to fix it the only way you can, Martha replied. But abandoning this child now would be much worse than anything you did in the past. During the following days, Edward struggled with deep depression. Lily noticed the change in his behavior and began to withdraw emotionally, thinking she had done something wrong. The girl returned to having constant nightmares and refusing food, behavior she hadn't shown in weeks. Edward doesn't like me anymore, she told Martha one morning, after Edward had left the house without saying goodbye. He gets sad when he sees me. Martha hugged the girl, furious with Edward for allowing his guilt to affect Lily. He is going through tough times, dear, but that has nothing to do with you. Is it because I asked about Daddy? He got sad after the man in the suit talked about my daddy. Lily's sharp perception left Martha speechless. The girl was connecting the changes in Edward's behavior with the conversation about her father, but couldn't understand why. That was when Martha made a drastic decision. She sought out Harrison and asked him to talk to Edward again, this time to make the man understand that his self-destructiveness was hurting exactly the person he claimed to want to protect. Edward, Harrison said during an unannounced visit, you are destroying that child with your guilt. She thinks she did something wrong because you are pulling away. Maybe it's better this way, Edward replied bitterly. Maybe she would be better off away from me. And where? With Valerie, who abandoned her in the foster care system? You are being selfish, not heroic. The harshness of Harrison's words hit Edward like a slap in the face. He realized he was repeating the pattern of abandonment that had destroyed Lily in the first place. That night, Edward found Lily crying silently in her room. She was hugging a teddy bear Martha had bought, whispering apologies for anything she might have done wrong. Seeing Lily crying alone was the wake-up call Edward needed. He entered the room silently, sitting on the edge of the bed where the girl curled up like a wounded animal. "Lily, can I talk to you?" he asked gently. The girl looked at him with red, swollen eyes. "Are you going to send me away?" The question broke Edward's heart. "Never. Why would you think that?" "Because you get sad when you see me, just like Aunt Valerie used to," Lily replied, her small voice loaded with pain. Edward took a deep breath, knowing he needed to be honest within limits appropriate for her age. "Little one, I found out some things about your daddy that made me very sad. Not sad with you, but sad about the situation." "What kind of things?" "I found out your daddy got hurt because he had to look for work in dangerous places," Edward explained carefully, "and that reminded me of decisions I made that hurt other people." Lily sat up in bed, her emotional maturity surprising for her 4 years. "Did you hurt my daddy?" The direct question forced Edward to face the truth. "Not directly, but I made decisions that caused him to lose his job, and because of that, he had to look for another job where he had an accident." Lily was silent for several minutes, processing this complex information. Finally, she asked, "Did you do it because you wanted to hurt him?" "No, little one, but that doesn't make it less wrong." "So you are taking care of me because you feel guilty?" The question revealed a perception beyond her years. Edward hesitated. "It started like that, but now you are the most important thing in my life. I love you as if you were my own daughter." Lily looked deeply into Edward's eyes, as if she could see through the darkness that afflicted him. "I love you too, and I don't care what happened before. You are here now." Those simple words of childlike forgiveness broke Edward's last emotional barriers. He hugged Lily, crying openly for the first time since the accident that had left him blind. The next morning, Edward made a decision that would change everything. He asked Harrison to schedule a visit to St. Francis Psychiatric Hospital to meet Dr. Sebastian Vance and discuss the possibility of Lily visiting her father. "Doctor, what is Joshua's current state?" Edward asked during the meeting. Dr. Sebastian, a 44-year-old man with experience in brain trauma, examined the charts. "He has shown some progress in recent weeks. He started talking more, although he still doesn't demonstrate specific memories. Sometimes he repeats the name Lily, but we don't know if it's a real memory or something he heard someone mention. Would it be safe for Lily to visit him?" Edward asked, correcting himself at the last moment. "It could be beneficial for both, but we need to be prepared for any reaction. Joshua might not recognize her, which would be devastating for the child. Or he might have an intense emotional reaction that destabilizes him." Edward went home with a heavy heart, knowing he would need to prepare Lily for the possibility of her father not recognizing her. When he told her about the planned visit, the girl's eyes shone with hope mixed with fear. "What if he doesn't like me anymore?" she asked. "He will always like you," Edward assured. "Sometimes, when people get very hurt in the head, they get confused for a while. But love doesn't go away." Meanwhile, Valerie hadn't given up on her plans. She had hired a disreputable lawyer, Silas Parker, known for taking dubious cases. During a meeting in his makeshift office, Valerie revealed her true motivations. "Listen here, Silas. That girl is living in a mansion with a millionaire. If I get custody of her back, I can demand substantial child support, Valerie said, smoking nervously. And do you have guardianship documents? Silas asked. I have some papers I made when Joshua disappeared. I don't know if they are totally official, but they work. Silas examined the documents and immediately realized they were amateur forgeries. Valerie, these papers won't withstand a serious investigation. So what do you suggest? Let's use public opinion pressure, a single rich man raising a little girl. We can plant doubts about his intentions. Silas's strategy was dirty, but effective. He began spreading rumors through the town, suggesting there was something suspicious about the situation. The gossip spread quickly through the Willow Creek community, known for its conservative nature. Edward began to notice changes in the treatment he received when he went out in public. Whispers ceased when he passed. Shopkeepers became more distant, and even Mr. Henderson, the kind baker, showed discomfort when Edward sought him out to testify about Lily's abandonment. Mr. Edward, I want to help, but people are saying things, Mr. Henderson said hesitantly. My reputation is also at stake. Social pressure was working exactly as Silas had planned. Edward found himself isolated from the community, facing judgmental looks and whispered comments wherever he went. The situation worsened when Dr. Sebastian called with worrying news. Mr. Edward, we had an unexpected visit here at the hospital. A woman identifying herself as Valerie, claiming to be Lily's legal guardian. She wanted to see Joshua. And you allowed it? We had no legal grounds to deny it. She brought documents that appeared to give her rights over medical decisions related to Joshua. Edward felt the world collapse around him. Valerie was getting close to Joshua, potentially manipulating a vulnerable man with amnesia for her own purposes. How did Joshua react to her visit? Strangely, he became agitated, repeating that she can't take the little princess. We don't know if it was a real memory or if something in her presence disturbed him. That night, Edward explained the situation to Lily as gently as possible. Little one, Valerie visited your daddy at the hospital. The immediate fear in Lily's eyes was devastating. Is she going to convince him to give me back to her? We won't let that happen, Edward promised, though he didn't know how he could keep that promise. During the following days, the pressure intensified. Silas Parker sent a legal notice demanding that Lily be returned to Valerie within 48 hours, under threat of a lawsuit for kidnapping a minor. Harrison was worried. Edward, even with the forgeries, Valerie has legal arguments. She can claim it was a temporary misunderstanding and that now she is prepared to care for the child. And Joshua? Doesn't he have more rights than her? Joshua is mentally incapacitated. A judge may determine that Valerie, as the stepmother who cared for the child after the father's incapacitation, has legal priority. Edward realized he was losing the legal battle. The combination of social pressure, questionable but existing documents, and Joshua's vulnerability was creating a perfect storm against him. It was then that Martha made an unexpected suggestion. Mr. Edward, what if we took Lily to visit her father before Valerie can manipulate the situation further? If Joshua demonstrates any recognition or protection towards his daughter, that could help legally. It was a risky bet, but Edward realized it might be his only chance. The hospital visit would be a decisive moment that could either reunite father and daughter or permanently destroy Lily's hopes of having a real family. Schedule it for tomorrow, Edward decided, knowing he was betting Lily's future on a single desperate move. The trip to Oakville was silent and tense. Lily sat in the back seat of Edward's car, wearing her best blue dress, tightly holding a drawing she had made during the night. It was a drawing of two figures holding hands, one big and one small, with the word Daddy written in childish letters at the top of the page. Edward, What if my daddy doesn't like me anymore? Lily asked for the third time during the trip. He will always like you, little one. Sometimes people get confused, but a father's love never goes away, Edward replied, trying to sound more confident than he really felt. Martha, who had insisted on accompanying them, held Lily's hand. Remember Dr. Sebastian said your daddy sometimes says your name? That means he remembers you in his heart. When they arrived at St. Francis Psychiatric Hospital, Lily was intimidated by the imposing appearance of the building. The white walls and long corridors created an atmosphere that made her feel small and vulnerable. Dr. Sebastian met them at the entrance, carefully explaining what might happen. Lily, your daddy might look different than you remember. He's gotten thinner and sometimes gets confused. But he is the same person inside, the doctor explained gently. Will he remember that I like fishing with him? Lily asked, her little eyes shining with hope. Maybe not immediately, but you can tell him about those memories. When they entered the visiting room, Lily saw a man sitting near the window looking at the garden with a blank expression. Joshua, 32, was visibly thinner and paler than in the girl's memories. His dark hair had premature grey strands and his hands trembled slightly. "Daddy," Lily whispered, hesitant to approach. Joshua turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting his daughter's. For a moment that seemed eternal, he just stared, as if trying to process something. Then his features softened and he murmured, "Princess?" Lily ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. Joshua hugged her instinctively, tears running down his face without him fully understanding why. "I missed you so much, Daddy," cried Lily. "Where were you? Why didn't you come home?" Joshua looked at Dr. Sebastian, confused. "Do I know her? Why do I feel so sad and happy at the same time?" "She is your daughter, Joshua." "Lily, you used to call her Princess," the doctor explained gently. "My daughter," Joshua repeated as if testing the words. "I have a daughter." He looked at Lily again, touching her face with trembling fingers. "You look like someone I loved very much." "I brought a drawing for you," Lily said, showing the crumpled paper. "It's us fishing like before." Joshua examined the drawing with intensity, and something in his face changed. "Fishing. I like fishing. Or used to. There is a place. A river. Green River," Lily exclaimed excitedly. "You taught me to fish there, and you always said I was your special princess." Lily's words seemed to awaken fragments of memories in Joshua. He began to cry, holding his daughter against his chest. "Princess. My special princess. How could I forget you?" Dr. Sebastian watched the scene with professional interest, taking notes. Joshua's emotional reaction was more intense than any progress he had shown in months of treatment. Edward remained silent in the corner of the room, witnessing the reunion between father and daughter with conflicting emotions. Seeing Lily's joy was wonderful, but it also awakened the fear of losing her forever. "Daddy, are you coming home with me?" Lily asked, her innocent question creating immediate tension in the room. Joshua looked around, confused. "Home? Where is home? Do I live here now?" Dr. Sebastian intervened delicately. "Joshua, you are here recovering from an accident. You are not ready to leave yet." "But I want to stay with my princess," Joshua said, squeezing Lily against him. "Can't she stay here with me?" The question created an uncomfortable silence. Edward felt his heart tighten, imagining losing Lily to her biological father, even in such complicated circumstances. It was then that Lily, with the inexplicable wisdom of children, said something that surprised everyone present. "Daddy, I'm living with Edward now. He takes very good care of me. Can you meet him?" Joshua looked at Edward for the first time, his eyes studying the blind man who had cared for his daughter. "You took care of my princess." Edward approached, his cane feeling the way. "Yes, Lily saved my life, and I tried to repay it by taking care of her." "He is very good, Daddy," Lily said. "He reads stories to me, helps me comb my hair, and never yells at me. And Martha makes the best cookies in the world." Joshua observed the interaction between Edward and Lily, noticing the ease and mutual affection between them. "Do you love her?" he asked directly to Edward. "As if she were my own daughter," Edward replied sincerely. Joshua was silent for several minutes, struggling with thoughts and emotions he couldn't fully organize. Finally, he said, "I can't take care of her right now, can I? My head is broken." "You will get better, Daddy," Lily said, kissing his cheek. "And when you get better, you can come visit us at the big house. It has a beautiful garden you will like." The visit lasted 2 hours, during which Joshua demonstrated more lucidity and emotional connection than he had shown since the accident. He asked questions about Lily's life, listened to her adventures in the mansion, and even thanked Edward repeatedly for taking care of his daughter. When it was time to leave, Joshua held Lily's hand. "Princess, can you come back to see me?" "Every week," promised Lily, "and I'll bring more drawings for you." "And you," Joshua said to Edward, "thank you for saving my girl when I couldn't do it." The goodbye was emotional for everyone. Lily cried, leaving her father, but she was also happy to have found him alive. In the car back, she bombarded Edward and Martha with questions and observations about the reunion. "He looked sad, but he got happy when he saw me," she commented. "I think he needs more visits to remember more things." Dr. Sebastian had been impressed with the results of the visit and called Edward the next day. Joshua's reaction yesterday was remarkable. He spent the whole night talking about Lily, remembering small details. Her presence could be fundamental to his recovery. But the happiness of the reunion was interrupted when they arrived home and found Valerie waiting at the gate, accompanied by Silas Parker and 2 bailiffs. "Just in time," Silas said with a malicious smile. "We have a court order for the immediate return of the minor Lily to her legal guardian." Lily hid behind Edward, terrified. "I don't want to go with her. I don't want to." Valerie approached with fake concern. "Lily, dear, come with Auntie. You've played house enough with the rich man." "Ah, she isn't my auntie," Lily shouted. "You kicked me out, said I was a pest." The bailiffs seemed uncomfortable with the situation, especially seeing the child's genuine terror. One of them addressed Edward. "Sir, we understand this is a delicate situation, but we have legal orders to comply with." That was when Harrison arrived running, carrying a folder of documents. "Wait, I have here a challenge to the alleged guardianship and evidence of child abandonment." The legal battle was just beginning, but now it would be fought in front of a terrified child who had just reunited with her father, and now faced the possibility of being handed over to the person she feared most in the world. The documentation Harrison presented created enough confusion for the bailiffs to decide to postpone the execution of the order until a judge could review the challenges. Valerie was furious, screaming that she was being a victim of manipulation by a rich man buying justice. "This won't stand," she threatened, pointing her finger at Edward. "That girl is my legal responsibility. You will pay for this." Silas Parker tried to calm his client, but was visibly annoyed with her behavior. It was difficult to defend a woman who showed more interest in revenge and money than in caring for a child. That night, Lily had the worst nightmare since arriving at the mansion. She woke up screaming that Valerie was trying to drag her into a dark hole and that her father had forgotten her again. Edward stayed with her the rest of the night, humming songs he remembered from his own childhood. "Edward, promise you won't let her take me," begged Lily, clinging to his shirt. "I promise I will fight with all my strength," he replied, though he knew it might not be enough. During the following weeks, the legal battle intensified. Harrison discovered Valerie's guardianship documents were gross forgeries, but Silas argued she had actually cared for Lily for 2 years, giving her rights by de facto status. The situation became complicated when the judge in charge of the case, Judge Arthur Sterling, demonstrated evident prejudice against the situation. During a hearing, he harshly questioned Edward's motivations. "Mr. Blackwood, you are a single man, without experience raising children, living alone in isolation for years. Why should you have custody of a little girl over her stepmother who has cared for her previously?" Edward felt the trap in the judge's words. "Your Honor, the question is not my experience, but Lily's well-being. Valerie abandoned the child on the streets for 3 weeks. According to her, it was a temporary misunderstanding during a period of emotional stress," the judge retorted. "People go through hard times. That doesn't permanently disqualify them as caregivers." Harrison tried to present evidence of the abandonment, but Mr. Henderson, the baker, had backed out of his promise to testify due to the social pressure he faced in town. Without witnesses willing to speak, Edward's case was weakening rapidly. It was during this time that something unexpected happened at Edward's company. His minority partners, Ulysses Stone and Theodore Banks, called an emergency meeting to discuss the company's future. "Edward, we need to talk about your personal situation," said Ulysses, a 61-year-old man known for his business ambition. "The rumors about you and this girl are affecting the company's reputation." "Our reputation has nothing to do with my personal life," Edward replied defensively. Theodore, 55, always more direct, got to the point. "We are losing important contracts. Clients are uncomfortable with the situation. Maybe it would be better for you to step away from management until this is resolved." Edward realized it wasn't just concern for the company, but an opportunity his partners saw to take full control of the business. "Are you trying to push me out of my own company?" "We are trying to save the company we built together," said Ulysses. "If you insist on this situation with the girl, you could destroy everything we took years to build." The pressure was coming from all sides now. Edward felt cornered between losing Lily or losing everything he had built professionally. Martha watched his struggle with growing concern. "Mr. Edward, you need to choose your battles," she advised one night. "You can't fight the whole world at the same time." "I can't abandon Lily," Edward replied firmly. "Not after everything she's been through. And I'm not saying to abandon her, but maybe you need a different strategy." It was then that Dr. Sebastian called with news that changed everything again. "Mr. Edward, I need to tell you something about Valerie's visit to the hospital." What happened?" "She tried to convince Joshua to sign documents transferring all legal rights over Lily to her. She claimed it was for the child's good, that you were using her to feel better about your blindness." Edward felt pure anger course through his body. "And did Joshua sign?" "No, actually." He became very agitated and said the good man was taking care of his princess and he didn't want changes. But Valerie insisted so much he had an anxiety attack and we had to sedate him. "How is he now?" "Better, but the episode caused a setback in his recovery. He became more confused and withdrawn again." This information gave Harrison a new line of legal defense. Valerie had tried to manipulate a mentally incapacitated man to obtain legal documents, which could be considered coercion. But Silas was prepared for this too. During the next hearing, he presented a surprising defense. "Your Honor, my client was merely trying to regularize a confusing situation. Joshua is clearly incapacitated, and someone needs to take legal decisions on behalf of him and the child. Who better than the person who cared for Lily for 2 years?" The judge seemed receptive to the argument. The lawyer's point is valid. If the biological father is incapacitated and there are no other relatives, the stepmother who actually cared for the child may have legal priority. Edward felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The law seemed to be on Valerie's side, despite all evidence of her inappropriate behavior. It was in this moment of despair that something completely unexpected happened. Lily, who was waiting outside the courtroom with Martha, heard familiar voices in the corridor. It was Mr. Henderson, the baker, talking to his wife Rose. "Henry, you can't let that innocent child suffer because of town gossip," Rose was saying. "You saw with your own eyes how she lived on the street. Your conscience will torment you for the rest of your life if you don't do the right thing." Lily approached timidly. "Mr. Henderson." The man turned and saw the girl he had helped for weeks, now dressed properly and clearly well cared for, but with eyes full of fear. "Lily, how are you, dear?" "Mr. Henderson, they are going to make me go back to Aunt Valerie's house," she said, her voice trembling. "Can you tell them I lived in your cardboard box, that I was very hungry and cold?" Rose knelt beside Lily. "Of course he can, darling. Henry, right now." The baker looked at his wife, then at Lily, and finally made the right decision. He entered the courtroom and asked to speak as a witness. "Your Honor, I am Henry Henderson, owner of Henderson's Bakery. For 3 weeks I found this child sleeping in a cardboard box behind my establishment. She was abandoned, hungry, and clearly in a situation of total helplessness." Mr. Henderson's testimony was devastating for Valerie's case. Silas tried to object, but the man was a respected figure in the community, and his testimony carried significant moral weight. Valerie, realizing she was losing, did something that definitively sealed her fate. She stood up in the hearing and screamed, "That girl has always been a problem. Since she arrived in my house, she only brought misfortune. Her father left me because of her." And the silence that followed was deafening. Valerie had publicly revealed her true feelings towards Lily, destroying any argument about acting in the child's best interest. The judge banged the gavel. "Hearing suspended for deliberation. Decision will be announced tomorrow." Edward left the court not knowing if he had won or lost, but with the certainty that the battle for Lily was far from over. The night before the judicial decision was the longest of Edward's life. He couldn't sleep, walking the mansion corridors like a ghost, while Lily slept restlessly in the room next door. 3 times she woke up calling for him, and 3 times he consoled her, promising everything would be okay, even without believing his own words. On the morning of the decision, Lily dressed with the same care of someone preparing for an important event. She had chosen the pink dress Martha had bought for her, and insisted on taking the drawing she had made of her father in the hospital. "If the judge lets me stay with you, I'll show that my daddy likes you too," she said, holding the sheet of paper carefully. The court was fuller than usual. The story had spread through Willow Creek, and many people from the town came to watch what they considered the trial of the century. There were those who supported Edward, impressed with his dedication to the girl, but also many who questioned his motivations. When Judge Arthur Sterling entered the room, silence was absolute. Lily sat between Edward and Martha, her little eyes fixed on the man who would decide her fate. After careful analysis of all testimonies and evidence presented, the judge began, his voice echoing through the silent room. "This court has reached a decision regarding the custody of the minor Lily." Edward held Lily's hand tightly, feeling his heart beat so hard he was sure everyone in the room could hear it. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that the petitioner Valerie abandoned the minor for a period of 3 weeks, leaving her in a situation of extreme vulnerability. Her guardianship documents were considered inadequate and questionable. Valerie shifted uncomfortably in her chair, while Silas tried to maintain a neutral expression. "However," continued the judge, and Edward felt his world collapse. "This court also considers that the petitioner Edward Blackwood, despite his good intentions, does not present the traditional family environment necessary for the proper upbringing of a minor." The murmur that spread through the room was immediately silenced by the judge's gavel. "Therefore, this court determines that the minor Lily be temporarily placed under the care of the foster care system until a more suitable family solution is found." The world stopped for Edward. Lily looked at him with confusion, not fully understanding what had just happened, but realizing by the expressions of the adults around her that something terrible had occurred. "No!" shouted Lily, her little voice echoing through the court. "I want to stay with Edward. He takes care of me." The judge banged the gavel again. "The decision is made. Social workers will be present to handle the transition of the minor." Harrison stood up immediately. "Your Honor, I would like to register an appeal and request that the child remain in her current situation until the appeal is judged." Denied. The child will be transferred today. Edward felt as if he were living his worst nightmare. He had lost Lily not to Valerie, but to something even worse, the total uncertainty of the foster care system. Outside the court, chaos ensued. Lily clung to Edward, crying desperately, "Please don't let me go. I promise I'll be a good girl. I won't make noise anymore. I won't ask for anything anymore." The girl's words broke the hearts of everyone present. Martha cried openly, while Edward tried to maintain composure to be strong for Lily. "Little one, listen well to what I'm going to tell you," Edward said, kneeling to be at her height. "This is not your fault. You are the most special girl in the world, and I will fight every day to bring you back." "You don't promise," sobbed Lily. "I promise with my life." The social worker who arrived to pick up Lily was a young woman named Fiona Adams, who was clearly uncomfortable with the situation. She had seen many difficult cases, but the obvious bond between Edward and Lily touched her deeply. "Mr. Blackwood, I understand this is very difficult," Fiona said, "but I will ensure Lily is placed with a loving temporary family, and you will be able to have supervised visits." "When?" Edward asked desperately. "We need a few days to make the appropriate arrangements." Lily was temporarily placed with a substitute family on the other side of town, Anthony and Margaret Peterson, a couple in their 50s who had cared for several children over the years. They were good people, but they weren't Edward and Martha. During the first days in the new house, Lily refused to eat and talk. She sat by the bedroom window, waiting to see Edward's car arriving to pick her up. Margaret tried to console her, but the girl was inconsolable. "She just wants to go home," Margaret told Fiona during a visit. "Doesn't eat, doesn't play, just cries and asks when Edward is coming." Meanwhile, Edward had plunged into deep depression. Without Lily, the mansion returned to being the silent mausoleum it was before. He stopped going to the office, stopped eating properly, and went back to drinking heavily. Martha was desperate. "Mr. Edward, you need to pull yourself together. How will you get Lily back if you stay in this state?" Maybe it's better this way," murmured Edward. "Maybe the judge was right. What does a child like her want with a broken man like me?" "You are not a broken man. You are a man who learned to love again because of that girl." It was during this time that an unexpected discovery changed everything again. Ulysses and Theodore, seeing Edward in a deplorable state, decided to press even harder to take full control of the company. During an internal audit they discovered old documents that revealed shocking information. "Edward," said Ulysses during a tense meeting, "we found some interesting papers in the company's old archives." "What papers?" Edward asked, trying to focus through the alcoholic haze that dominated his days. Theodore pushed a folder across the table. "Records from suppliers 3 years ago. Looks like someone was buying defective safety equipment and pocketing the difference." Edward opened the folder and was shocked by what he saw. Documents showed Theodore had systematically bought second-rate safety equipment for the company, pocketing the difference between the actual cost and what he charged the company. "Theodore, what does this mean?" The man was visibly nervous. "It's just cost optimizations, normal business practices." "Normal business practices don't include putting employees at risk with defective equipment," Edward replied, his mind beginning to clear for the first time in weeks. Ulysses tried to minimize the situation. Edward, you are being paranoid. These are common practices. Common practices that resulted in work accidents? Edward stood up, feeling growing anger. How many employees got hurt because of this defective equipment? The realization began to hit Edward like an avalanche. The accidents that had happened at the company, including his own that left him blind, were not just bad luck. They were the direct result of inadequate safety equipment bought by his own partners. The work accident that resulted in my blindness, Edward said slowly, was caused by a defective piece of equipment you bought. The silence in the room confirmed his suspicions. And if you were buying defective equipment for our company, how many other companies were doing the same thing? How many workers like Joshua got hurt on sites that used equipment you sold? Theodore went pale. Edward, you are delusional. I'm starting to see for the first time in years, Edward retorted. You not only put our employees at risk, but created a supply network of defective equipment that affected construction sites throughout the region. The discovery changed everything. Edward wasn't just a victim of his own bad business decisions. He was a victim of a conspiracy by his own partners who had prioritized profit over human safety. And if this could be proved, it could not only clear his conscience, but also provide the resources needed to fight properly for Lily's custody. The discovery about the defective equipment gave Edward a new perspective on his whole life. For 3 years, he had carried guilt for decisions he thought were his, when in fact he was being manipulated by corrupt partners. The anger he felt was transformative, pulling him out of depression and giving him a clear goal. Harrison, Edward said during an urgent meeting, his voice loaded with determination he hadn't shown in weeks. I need you to investigate all supply contracts for the last 5 years. I want to know exactly how many companies were affected by the defective equipment. Edward, this could open a Pandora's box, warned the lawyer. If we confirm there was a systematic scheme, the legal implications will be huge. Good. That is exactly what I want. Harrison spent the next days immersed in old documents, tracking suppliers and contracts. What he discovered was even worse than Edward imagined. Theodore had created a complex network of shell companies that sold defective safety equipment to dozens of construction firms in the region. Edward, I found records of at least 20 work accidents in the last 3 years that could be linked to the equipment supplied by Theodore, reported Harrison. Joshua was just one of the victims. The information hit Edward like lightning. How many families were destroyed because of this scheme? Many, and they are all entitled to compensation and justice. Meanwhile, Lily continued wasting away at the Petersons' house. Anthony and Margaret did their best to console her, but the girl had regressed emotionally, returning to showing signs of trauma she hadn't shown for months. Will Edward forget me like my daddy forgot? She asked Margaret one night, after another nightmare. Of course not, dear. He is fighting to bring you back, Margaret replied, though she herself had doubts about when that would happen. Fiona, the social worker, visited Lily regularly and was increasingly worried about the girl's emotional state. She is regressing rapidly, she told her supervisor. She went back to wetting the bed, hasn't spoken for 2 days, and refuses to leave the room. And the man who cared for her. Edward Blackwood. By my assessment, he genuinely loves this child. But the judge was inflexible about not allowing a single man to have custody. It was during one of these visits that Lily did something that surprised Fiona. The girl had been quiet during the entire conversation, but when the social worker got up to leave, Lily held her hand. "Miss, can you take a letter to Edward?" she asked with a voice hoarse from crying. "Of course I can, dear." Lily ran to the bedroom and returned with a paper folded several times. It was a drawing of 2 big figures and a small one, all with tears in their eyes, and written below in crooked letters, "I love you, Edward, come back to me." When Fiona handed the drawing to Edward, he broke down in tears. It was the first communication he had from Lily since she was taken, and the simple but devastating message clearly showed how much she was suffering. "How is she?" Edward asked, holding the drawing as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. "Bad. Very bad," Fiona replied honestly. "Mr. Blackwood, may I speak frankly with you? Please. In my 10 years as a social worker, I have rarely seen such a strong bond between a child and her caregiver. Lily is wasting away without you, and by your appearance, you are also suffering deeply." Edward nodded, unable to speak. "The problem isn't that you wouldn't be a good father to her. The problem is that the system isn't prepared for unconventional situations, but maybe there is a way around this. How? If you had a partner, a mother figure for Lily, the judge might reconsider." The suggestion left Edward thoughtful. He hadn't considered marriage since Diana, but if it was necessary to get Lily back. "I know someone who would be perfect," Martha said that night when Edward shared the conversation with Fiona. "Who?" "Connie, my younger sister. She is 48, widowed for 5 years, and always wanted children but never could. She knows Lily, and the two like each other." Edward remembered Connie from the few times she had visited the mansion. She was a kind and affectionate woman who had shown genuine affection for Lily. "Martha, I can't ask someone to marry me just to help me get custody of a child." "And who said it would be just for that?" Martha retorted. "Connie has always liked you, and you need someone in your life besides Lily." While Edward struggled with this possibility, Harrison brought news that completely changed the course of the situation. "Edward, I got information on Judge Arthur Sterling," he said during a meeting. "He has a history of controversial decisions, especially involving single men in custody cases." "Are you suggesting bias?" "I'm suggesting his decisions follow a questionable pattern. And I discovered something more interesting. He received significant donations for his last election campaign from companies linked to Theodore." The implication was clear. The judge who had decided against Edward had financial connections with one of the men responsible for the defective equipment. Is this enough reason to request an annulment of the decision? Potentially, but we need more evidence. It was then that something unexpected happened. Dr. Sebastian called from the hospital with news about Joshua that changed everything. "Mr. Edward, Joshua had a significant breakthrough," the doctor said excitedly. "Not only are his memories coming back gradually, but he is constantly asking about Lily and about you." "What do you mean?" "He remembers you now. Remembers you took care of his daughter when he couldn't, and he is very agitated about her being taken from your house." "Does he want to see her?" "He does, but mainly he wants to talk to you. Said he needs to fix an injustice." Those were his words. Edward rushed to the hospital, hoping to finally have a real conversation with Lily's father. When he arrived, he found Joshua very different from his previous visits. His eyes were alert and focused, and there was a determination in his posture that didn't exist before. "Edward," Joshua said as soon as he saw him, "I need to thank you and apologize at the same time." "There is nothing to apologize for, Joshua." "Yes, there is. I left my daughter helpless when she needed me most. You did what I should have done. You were sick. It wasn't your fault." Joshua looked directly into Edward's eyes. "Dr. Sebastian told me you lost custody of Lily. The judge thought she would be better off in the foster care system." "That is insanity," Joshua exploded. "My daughter was happy, healthy, and loved in your house. How can they take her from there?" "The system doesn't understand unconventional situations." Joshua was silent for a few moments, clearly processing important information. Finally, he said, "Edward, I want to do something that will seem strange, but I need you to trust me. What do you have in mind? I want to name you as Lily's legal guardian. As her biological father, I have rights that supersede any judicial decision on temporary custody. The proposal left Edward speechless. Joshua, are you sure? You barely know me. I know enough. I know a man who saved my daughter when she was abandoned, a man who loved her when she had no one, a man who is fighting to get her back, even facing the whole system. But what about your recovery? You might want Lily back when you are completely well. Joshua smiled sadly. Edward, even if I recover completely, I will never be able to give Lily what you can give. Financial security, educational opportunities, and mostly the unconditional love you two already share. Joshua's offer was the salvation Edward dared not hope for, but also brought a responsibility that terrified him. Accepting would mean officially assuming the role of father, something he always wanted but never had the courage to pursue. The decision to accept Joshua's proposal wasn't easy for Edward. All night, he walked the empty corridors of the mansion, thinking about the implications of officially becoming Lily's father. It was a responsibility he desperately desired, but that also terrified him. "Mr. Edward," Martha said the next morning, finding him still awake in the library, "have you decided? How can I make such an important decision when I can barely manage my own life?" He replied, voice laden with doubt. "You have already been taking care of her for months. The difference now is, it would be official." Edward knew Martha was right, but the fear of failing as a father paralyzed him. What if I can't give her everything she deserves? What if I disappoint both her and Joshua? What if you are exactly the father she needs? Martha retorted. "Mr. Edward, that girl already chose you. Now you need to choose her back." While Edward wrestled with his decision, Lily was going through her own battle. At the Petersons, she had stopped speaking and eating completely. Anthony and Margaret were desperate, not knowing how to help her. "She just sits by the window waiting," Margaret told Fiona during an emergency visit. "Doesn't answer when we talk to her, doesn't play with toys. It's like part of her has left." Fiona observed Lily, who was curled up in an armchair, hugging a teddy bear she had brought from Edward's mansion. The girl seemed to have aged years in just a few weeks. "Lily," Fiona tried, kneeling beside the armchair, "would you like to see Edward?" For the first time in days, Lily reacted. Her little eyes filled with tears, and she nodded vigorously. "I'll see what I can do," Fiona promised, knowing she would need to break some rules to arrange a visit. That same day, Harrison brought news that further complicated the situation. "Edward, Theodore found out we are investigating the defective equipment scheme. He is trying to destroy evidence." "How do you know?" "I received an anonymous call from someone at the company. Theodore ordered all old files to be reorganized. It's a polite way of saying he is destroying proof." Edward felt the urgency of the situation. "Can we get a court order to preserve the documents?" "I'm trying, but Theodore has connections. He might manage to delay the process long enough to clear everything." It was then that Edward made a drastic decision. "I'm going to confront him directly." "Edward, that could be dangerous. If he is willing to destroy evidence, we don't know what else he is capable of." "I don't care. I already lost Lily because of his manipulations. I won't let him destroy the evidence that can help me get her back." Edward arrived at the company in the middle of the afternoon, finding unusual activity. Employees were carrying boxes of documents to a truck parked at the back of the building. When he entered the office, he found Theodore personally supervising the operation. "Edward, what a surprise," Theodore said, visibly nervous. "Are you feeling better?" "Much better, actually, especially since I discovered the truth about the defective equipment." Theodore's face went pale. "I don't know what you are talking about." "Of course you know. Just as you know you are destroying evidence right this moment." We are just doing a reorganization of old files. For an incinerator, Edward pointed to the truck being loaded. Theodore, how many people got hurt because of your scheme? How many families were destroyed? Theodore tried to maintain composure. Edward, you are paranoid. These are just unimportant old documents. Documents that show how you systematically supplied defective equipment to construction companies, resulting in dozens of accidents, including Joshua's and my own. Theodore's silence confirmed Edward's suspicions. Why? Edward asked, his voice loaded with pain. Why ruin so many lives for money? You don't understand the pressure we faced, Theodore exploded finally. Competition was fierce. We needed to cut costs to survive. And cutting costs meant compromising worker safety? It meant doing what was necessary to keep the company running. Ulysses entered the office at that moment, seeing the confrontation in progress. Edward, what are you doing here? Discovering how my own partners deceived me for years, Edward replied. How you made me believe the layoffs were necessary when actually they were to hide the defective equipment scheme. Ulysses and Theodore looked at each other, realizing their conspiracy had been discovered. The layoffs were to protect the company, Ulysses said defensively. They were to protect you, Edward corrected. Firing employees, you reduced the number of people who could discover the scheme, and when accidents happened, you blamed worker negligence instead of defective equipment. The confrontation was interrupted when Harrison arrived with 2 private investigators and a court order to preserve all company documents. Too late, Theodore said bitterly, pointing to the truck that was leaving. But Edward smiled for the first time in weeks. Actually, no. Martha photographed all important documents weeks ago when you started acting suspiciously. The shock on Ulysses and Theodore's faces was evident. Edward had anticipated their attempts to destroy evidence. Meanwhile, Fiona managed to arrange a supervised visit between Edward and Lily. When they met in the social service visitation room, both cried with emotion. Edward, shouted Lily, running into his arms, you didn't forget me. I could never forget you, little one, he said, hugging her tightly. How are you? Sad, very sad. I want to go home. I know, my dear. I'm working to make that happen. Lily looked into Edward's eyes with a seriousness beyond her 4 years. Do you promise you won't give up on me? I promise with all my heart. During the visit, Lily told him about the nightmares she had every night, about how she couldn't eat thinking of him, and about how she drew pictures of him every day. Edward, in turn, told her about his discoveries at the company and about the possibility of her coming home soon. Will Daddy Joshua let you be my official dad? Lily asked, naturally using the title she had given Edward. He said yes, but I need to be sure that is what you want. It's the thing I want most in the world. She replied without hesitation. When the visit ended, Edward knew he had made his decision. He called Joshua from the social service parking lot. Joshua, I accept your proposal. I want to officially become Lily's father. Are you sure, Edward? Absolute. She is the most important thing in my life. Then let's do the papers, but there is a condition. What? I want to continue being part of her life, not as a father, that role is yours now, but as a special uncle, someone she can visit and who can follow her growth. Joshua's generosity moved Edward deeply. Of course, Joshua. Lily needs to know you love her and that your illness wasn't your fault. Thank you, Edward, for everything. That night, Edward called Connie, Martha's sister, and made a proposal that would change all their lives. Connie, I know it will sound crazy, but I would like you to consider marrying me. Not for romantic love, at least not initially, but to form a family with Lily. On the other end of the line, there was a long silence before Connie replied, Edward, I accept, but not just for Lily. I accept because I believe we can build something real and beautiful together. Preparations for the legal transfer of Lily's custody were more complex than Edward imagined. Joshua, even showing remarkable recovery, still needed to undergo psychiatric evaluations to confirm his capacity to make important legal decisions. Dr. Sebastian coordinated a battery of tests for a whole week. "The results are encouraging," Dr. Sebastian told Edward and Harrison during a meeting at the hospital. "Joshua demonstrates complete lucidity regarding Lily's situation and perfectly understands the implications of transferring custody." "But," asked Edward, sensing hesitation in the doctor's voice, "but he still has episodes of confusion about other aspects of his life. He remembers Lily and recent events, but large chunks of his previous memory remain foggy." Harrison took notes carefully. "From a legal standpoint, does this affect his ability to make this decision?" "Not necessarily. The decision about Lily is being made based on his current memories and perceptions, which are clear. He understands he cannot properly care for his daughter now, and that Edward demonstrated genuine love and dedication." While legal papers were being prepared, Connie began to gradually integrate into life at the mansion. Her presence brought a feminine energy that had been missing since Diana's departure years ago. Martha was radiant to have her sister around, and even Edward was surprised at how Connie seemed to fit naturally into the environment. "Will she like me?" Connie asked one afternoon, while preparing the room that would be Lily's when she returned. "Lily likes anyone who shows genuine affection," Edward replied, "and from what Martha tells me, you two already know each other a little." "Yes, but now it will be different. Now I will be. Well, I will be her mother." The word mother still sounded strange on Connie's lips, but there was genuine joy in her voice that didn't escape Edward. Meanwhile, the situation at Edward's company took a dramatic turn. Evidence of the defective equipment scheme was overwhelming, and Ulysses and Theodore were facing criminal charges, but they didn't intend to go down without a fight. "Edward," said Ulysses during a tense meeting with lawyers present, "we can reach an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "We assume responsibility for the equipment problems, compensate the victims, and you keep your share in the company without suing us criminally." Edward considered the proposal for a moment. The company had been his life for decades, and losing it would be a significant blow. But looking at the photographs of documents Martha had saved, evidence of so much suffering caused by greed, made his decision for him. "There is no possible agreement," Edward said firmly. "You will answer for every life you ruined." Theodore's face contorted with anger. "You will regret this, Edward. We will drag your name in the mud along with ours. Do whatever you want. My conscience is clear." Theodore's threat was not empty. During the following days, a systematic smear campaign began against Edward. Articles planted in local newspapers questioned his motivations for adopting Lily, suggesting he was trying to improve his public image after the scandals at the company. "Businessman tries to buy redemption. Adopting orphan child." It read a particularly malicious headline. The article painted Edward as a man desperate to clear his reputation after years of business negligence. The campaign affected Edward deeply, but had an unexpected effect. It mobilized people who really knew him. Mr. Henderson, the baker, finally found courage to speak publicly about how he had seen Lily abandoned and how Edward genuinely cared for her. Former employees fired from the company began to speak out, distinguishing between Edward's actions and those of his corrupt partners. "Mr. Edward was always fair with us," said Robert Smith, former factory employee, in an interview for the local paper. "The layoffs hurt, but now we know he was deceived by his own partners, and the way he takes care of that girl shows the kind of man he really is." Growing public support gave Harrison ammunition to speed up the legal process of custody transfer. Edward, with Joshua formally agreeing, the marriage to Connie and community support. We have a very strong case. How much longer? If everything goes well, Lily could be back home next week. But the news filled Edward with hope but also anxiety. How would Lily react to so many changes? How would she feel about having Connie as a new mother? And mostly, how would it be for all of them to adapt to being a real family? On the day of the final hearing, the court was packed again. But this time, most people present were there to support Edward. When Judge Arthur Sterling entered, his expression was visibly uncomfortable. The connections between him and Theodore had been exposed publicly, forcing him to be more careful in his decisions. Joshua was present, accompanied by Dr. Sebastian, to personally testify to his decision to transfer custody to Edward. When called to speak, his voice was firm and clear. "Your Honor, I want it registered that this decision is not being taken due to incapacity or coercion. I am transferring custody of my daughter Lily to Edward Blackwood because I recognize he can give her everything I cannot offer at the moment." "And are you absolutely sure of this?" asked the judge. "I am. Edward saved my daughter when she was abandoned, loved her when she had no one, and fought for her when everyone else gave up. He is the father she deserves." Connie also testified, explaining her decision to marry Edward and form a family with Lily. "It is not a marriage of convenience, Your Honor. It is a genuine commitment to build a family based on love and mutual care." When it was time for Lily to speak, Fiona brought her to the court. The girl was visibly nervous. But when she saw Edward, she ran to his arms, as she always did. "Lily," said the judge with a gentle voice, "do you understand? We are here to decide who you are going to live with." "Yes, Mr. Judge," she replied, her little voice firm despite her age. "And who would you like to live with?" "With my daddy Edward and my new mommy Connie, and I want my daddy Joshua to be able to visit me always." "Bakashiya, why do you want to live with them?" Lily thought for a moment before answering with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Because they love me for real, and because when I'm with them, I'm not scared." Lily's simple but powerful words echoed through the silent court. Even the judge seemed moved. "Very well," said Judge Sterling finally. "After hearing all testimonies and carefully reviewing the evidence presented, this court determines that the custody of the minor Lily be officially transferred to Edward Blackwood and his wife, Connie Blackwood." The relief that took over Edward was so intense he almost fainted. Lily jumped into his arms, crying with joy, while Connie hugged them both. "Can we go home now?" Lily asked. "We can go home," confirmed Edward, his voice choked with emotion, but not everything was resolved yet. On the other side of the court, Valerie watched the decision with an expression of absolute fury. When everyone was preparing to leave, she approached Edward. "This doesn't end here," she said with a low voice full of venom. "That girl should be with me. You will pay for this." Silas tried to calm his former client, but Valerie pulled away sharply. "I don't need you anymore," she said to the lawyer. "I'll handle this my way." The threat left everyone uncomfortable, but in that moment, nothing could diminish the joy of finally being reunited as a legal family. On the trip back home, Lily sat between Edward and Connie, holding both their hands. "Are we a real family now?" she asked. "We are a real family now," Connie confirmed, kissing the top of the girl's head. But while they celebrated, none of them imagined Valerie was planning one last desperate move that would put all their happiness at risk. 3 weeks after Lily returned home, life at the mansion had found a new and harmonious rhythm. Connie had adapted surprisingly well to the role of mother, and her presence brought emotional stability that benefited everyone. Lily, in turn, blossomed with the security of finally having a complete and official family. "Mommy Connie," Lily said one morning, naturally using the title she had chosen for her new mother. "Can you teach me to make cookies like Aunt Martha's?" "Of course, my dear." How about we start this afternoon? Edward watched these interactions with deep gratitude that still surprised him. For years, he had convinced himself he was a man destined for loneliness, but now found himself surrounded by a loving family that had formed in a completely unexpected way. Weekly visits to St. Francis Hospital became a special ritual for everyone. Joshua continued progressing in his recovery, and his relationship with Lily deepened with every meeting, but he carefully maintained his role as special uncle, respecting Edward's place as father. "How is my princess today?" Joshua asked every time, and Lily ran to hug him, telling excitedly about her adventures of the week. "Daddy Joshua, I learned to make cookies, and Daddy Edward is teaching me to read." During these visits, Dr. Sebastian documented not only Joshua's recovery, but also the impressive harmony of the unconventional family situation they had created. It was during one of these visits that they received worrying news. Fiona appeared at the hospital with a grave expression, interrupting the family meeting. "Edward, I need to speak with you urgently," she said, her voice loaded with concern. Edward followed Fiona to the corridor, leaving Lily playing with Joshua. "What happened?" "Valerie disappeared from Willow Creek a week ago. No one knows where she is, but there have been reports she has been asking questions about Lily's schedule, about when she is alone, about the family's routines." Edward's blood ran cold. "Do you think she might try something?" "I don't know, but you need to stay alert. A rejected and desperate woman can do unpredictable things." Edward went back inside the room, trying to maintain composure, but Lily noticed his tension immediately. "Daddy Edward, are you worried?" she asked, interrupting her game with Joshua. "Just work, little one. Nothing to worry about." But Joshua, with his sensitivity sharpened by traumatic experience, realized there was something more serious happening. When Lily went to the bathroom, he approached Edward. "What is really happening?" Edward hesitated, but decided to trust Joshua. "Valerie is making threats. Fiona thinks she might try something against Lily." Joshua's expression hardened immediately. "We won't let anything happen to her. Never again." During the trip back to Willow Creek, Edward took extra precautions. He asked Connie not to leave Lily alone even for a moment and hired discreet security to watch the property. But despite all precautions, none of them were prepared for what Valerie planned. 2 days later, while Lily played in the garden supervised by Martha, Connie received a call that changed everything. "Mrs. Blackwood, this is from the city hospital. There is a woman here claiming to be a relative of yours and who had a serious accident. She is asking to see the girl Lily urgently." Connie was confused. "What woman? We don't have relatives hospitalized." "She identified herself as Valerie, says she is the child's aunt and might not last much longer, insists she needs to say goodbye to the girl." Connie's heart raced. It was clearly a trap, but an elaborate one. "I will verify with my husband and call back." When she called Edward at the office, he realized the deception immediately. "Connie, don't believe it. It's an attempt to separate us from Lily." "But what if it's true?" "It isn't. Valerie is trying to manipulate us." But while they talked on the phone, Valerie was executing the second part of her plan. She had studied the house routines for days and knew that on Thursday afternoons, Martha always took Lily to the back garden while Connie prepared dinner. Disguised as an employee of a landscaping company, Valerie managed to get close enough to the property to see Lily playing. When Martha stepped away for a moment to get a watering can, Valerie acted. "Lily," she called from the other side of the fence. "Remember me? I'm your Aunt Valerie." Lily looked in the direction of the voice and felt an immediate chill in her stomach. It was the woman who had kicked her out, who had called her a pest, who had caused so much suffering in her life. "You can't be here," Lily said, stepping back instinctively. "I came to get you, dear. Your real life is with me, not with these rich strangers." "They aren't strangers, they are my family," screamed Lily, running towards the house. But Valerie had anticipated this too. She had cut the back fence during the previous night, creating an opening she could pass through. When Lily ran, Valerie intercepted her. "You come with me now," said Valerie, grabbing the girl's arm tightly. Lily began to scream desperately. "Help! Mommy Connie, Aunt Martha, Daddy Edward!" Lily's scream alerted the whole house. Connie dropped everything in the kitchen and ran to the garden, finding Valerie trying to drag the girl towards the hole in the fence. "Let go of my daughter!" screamed Connie, running towards them. "She is not your daughter," retorted Valerie. "She is mine, always was mine." The struggle that followed was brief but intense. Connie, motivated by the maternal protective instinct she had discovered in herself, faced Valerie with a ferocity that surprised both of them. Martha arrived running and helped hold Valerie while Connie protected Lily. "Call the police!" shouted Martha, hugging Lily, who cried convulsively. When authorities arrived, they found Valerie restrained by the two women, screaming about her rights and how Lily belonged to her. But her actions had finally proved definitively that she represented a real danger to the child. "This time, there will be no way for her to escape consequences," the police chief told Edward when he arrived home. "Attempted kidnapping, trespassing, threats. She's going to prison for a good while." That night, after Lily finally fell asleep after hours of consolation and reassurance, Edward, Connie and Martha gathered in the living room to process what had happened. "She was really willing to drag Lily by force," Connie said, still shaking. There was hatred in her eyes that was terrifying. "But it's over now," Edward said firmly. "Valerie can't threaten us anymore." During the following months, the Blackwood family life finally found the peace they all deserved. Valerie was sentenced to 2 years in prison, and a permanent restraining order was issued, protecting Lily from any future contact. Edward's company underwent a complete restructuring. With Ulysses and Theodore facing criminal charges, Edward took full control and implemented compensation programs for all victims of the defective equipment. The company not only survived the scandal, but prospered under a new philosophy of social responsibility. Joshua continued his remarkable recovery, progressing to the point of being discharged from the hospital and moving into a small apartment near the family. He found work in a local workshop and established himself as a constant and loving presence in Lily's life, always respecting his role as special uncle. 6 months after the incident with Valerie, on a sunny Sunday morning, Lily was in the garden helping Connie plant flowers when she made an observation that perfectly summarized her journey. "Mommy Connie," she said, her small hands dirty with soil. "I remember when I lived in the box behind the bakery and dreamed of having a family. But I never imagined I would have such a big family and that they would love me so much." Connie hugged the girl, tears of happiness running down her face. "And we never imagined how our life would be complete with you." Edward, who watched the scene from the porch, reflected on how a terrible morning 8 months ago had turned into the greatest blessing of his life. He had lost his sight 3 years before, but it was a 4-year-old child who taught him to truly see, to see what really mattered in life. "Daddy Edward," called Lily, running towards him with a new drawing. "I made a picture of all of us. Look." The drawing showed a big house surrounded by a flowery garden with 5 smiling figures in front: Edward, Connie, Lily, Joshua, and Martha. Above the house, she had drawn a bright sun and the words, "My Happy Family," written in colorful and crooked letters. "It is perfect, little one," said Edward, hugging his daughter. "Just like our family." And for the first time in his adult life, Edward Blackwood was truly and completely happy. The girl who had saved his life that fateful morning had in fact saved his soul. And together, they had built something neither of them thought possible: A family based not on blood or convention, but on pure love, conscious choice, and the kind of bond that transcends all adversities. The sun set over Willow Creek, painting the sky in golden tones, while the Blackwood family prepared to have dinner together, a simple tradition that for them represented everything they had achieved after so much suffering. Lily had found her place in the world, and Edward had discovered that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the greatest challenges. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.